The name of our program is the M1 Garand Rifle, the story of the rifle that won World War II and those who produced it. Today we have Jerry Netherland, and Jerry grew up just southwest of the city of Petersburg in Dinwiddie County. Early on, he discovered a passion for history and especially Virginia history. His parents often took he and his brothers to the Quartermaster Museum at Fort Lee and the Petersburg National Battlefield. Jerry started studying and collecting World War I and II weapons and bayonets and other items in 2022. Jerry retired from local government in 2018, and he and his wife Marina live in Chester, Virginia. So this is quite a collection in the few years that you've been collecting. Very impressive. We also have Bruce Alford. He's a retired firefighter from Henrico County. He's an avid outdoorsman, going fishing and exploring every chance he gets. He's a veteran of the Air Force. Thank you for your service. His son Nathan, following in his footsteps, currently serving as a captain in the United States Air Force. Wonderful. Bruce is passionate about history, spending a good amount of time studying, collecting, and exploring history. Bruce collected his first M1 Garand rifle in 2021. He and his wife Elizabeth both live in Goochland, Virginia. So let's welcome Jerry Netherland and Bruce Alford.
All right, going to test this headset. I hope that it's working and that I'm projecting across. Very good. I see a thumbs up in the back, so thank you very much for that. Appreciate everybody being here today and hearing our topic. It's something we're pretty passionate about, got into collecting these and so forth, and every one of these that we collect, we also are able to take them to the range and shoot them and maintain them and everything else. So I will say, number one, safety-wise, all of these weapons have been safety checked and all of that, so no live rounds in here. The live rounds are all wrapped up in this box, and this is a World War II box of the ammunition. I'm not going to open that for sure, so that's the only live rounds that are in here. Everything else that you see and I'll hand around are dummy rounds and that type of thing. So I just want to make sure that you understand safety first. Again, this is a very passionate topic for us. We've enjoyed collecting them and all, and then last year we actually got to go down to Anniston, Alabama at the CMP, Civilian Marksmanship Program, started under Roosevelt years back. Theodore Roosevelt, he wanted civilian marksmanship to be able and capable here in the United States. So Civilian Marksmanship Program, we were able to go down there to Anniston and actually build a rifle from the ground up, basically taking the receiver, putting a barrel onto it, putting the other parts and everything. So it was a wonderful experience to be able to do that. With that, what are some things that you all know about the M1? And I'm going to call it Garand because that is our term that we like to use here in America. We like to use the term Garand instead of Garand, and you'll hear more about that story in just a moment. What are some things you might have heard about the rifle before?
It's heavy.
It's heavy, yes. Heavy rifle for sure, and that is part of the determination of this rifle. It's heavy, but then also it's rugged. And some of the gentlemen who were issued these, I'm getting a little bit of feedback, some of the gentlemen that were issued these and military-wise, they were talking about M1 Garand thumb. So think about that for a moment. So I'm going to demonstrate real quick. And again, these all have been safety checked. Using the clip, it's nothing in the clip or anything like that right now, but I'll demonstrate for you one of the famous things about them, and that is, so after the soldier had shot his 8 shots through this, then that would basically pop out of the action and you could end up loading another one right after that and keep on going. There's a myth out there that the soldiers, the Germans, heard them when they ejected their clip and stuff. That's all a myth. In the heat of battle, You're never going to know it. So that did not affect our troops or anything like that. But that famous ping, anytime somebody's at the range, when I'm at the range and I shoot this and that pings out, everybody knows I'm shooting an M1 Garand rifle. So with that, why was this rifle developed? Why was the M1 Garand rifle developed? Infantry bolt-action rifles in World War I. We used the Springfield 1903 and then the M1917 U.S. Enfield rifle. So those were the two that our troops were using in the World War I. They're both bolt-action rifles, and you'll see some issues that come up. So Bruce is going to demonstrate dry firing 5 rounds through the 1917 Springfield, the 1903. So with this rifle, 1903, you had to use a stripper clip to load it in. And then each time you fired it, you had to go through this process.
You got that one.
As you can see, in the heat of the moment, it can be difficult to work the bolt compared to what the Garand had to offer. Yeah. So what were some issues you saw when he went through that? What happens to his eye when he's looking? He's got to take his eye off his targets. He's got to manipulate that bolt each and every time. So therefore, our Ordnance Department wanted to develop a shoulder-mounted semi-automatic rifle instead of these bolt-action ones. We were still going into the latter years with these bolt-action ones. We've been using these since World War I. The loading of it also is an issue. Going to hand these around. These are dummy rounds. They're filled with glue. They are not live or anything like that. And actually, you'll see that the primer has been fired on this too. So I'll kind of just hand one and let you all kind of hand one back and take a look at it. And you'll see the bullet. The bullet that was fired, ooh. These are the same caliber that was fired in the earlier weapons, 1903s and the 1917s, and the M1 Garand. So they all used that same 30-06 cartridge. At the turn of the 20th century, there was a desire to develop and adopt a semi-automatic shoulder rifle for our infantry, for our military. From the Book of the Garand by Major General Julian S. Hatcher, the difficulty in making a practical military semi-automatic shoulder rifle did not lie in inventing a system of operation. The difficulty was in taking such a system and then making from it a gun that was simple, rugged, durable, within the weight limit, she had pointed out earlier, weight, and which would function under all kinds of adverse conditions and would fire rapidly without heating up too much. So again, some of that is some of the issue. Automatics, as you see on this slide, were already invented in the earlier 1900s. So we had automatic weapons, but look how big they are. The Browning automatic rifle at the top left, 19 pounds. The Thompson submachine gun, 13 pounds. Then you've got these other tripod type ones, the 1919 water-cooled, that big water tank and everything to cool that one. And then you got the air-cooled 1919, but it's belt fed. That took a team of soldiers to move those around, not just one infantry soldier. So, and again, semi-automatics did exist. The 1911 .45 caliber pistol our military used all the way up until 1986. But those were automatic, semi-automatic. But again, a pistol cartridge versus that big cartridge I'm handing around for you all now of a rifle, a lot of difference in the pressures and explosion and all the other things. So it has to be a rugged rifle, and they hadn't discovered that quite yet. Look at this beast, 32 pounds, 8 ounces. Could you imagine trying to carry that thing around a battlefield? You have to be a massive individual. So the Army Ordnance Department, this is their requirements of a semi-automatic shoulder rifle. Self-loading with caliber 30, model 30-06, and this cartridge was developed in 1906, that's where the .06 comes from, 30 caliber. It has to be simple, rugged, and the mechanism protected. As an infantry soldier running across a field, the mechanism down here at the bottom has to be protected. That's why they didn't really want the magazine type that we see soldiers using nowadays. They didn't really want that back at that time because a soldier running across a field, what's he doing? Jumping and diving down in the mud. When he dives down in the mud for protection or to keep from getting hit by enemy fire, all of that mud and everything goes right up into the action. So they wanted it protected. Then you've got the easiest and fewest parts to manufacture was another requirement that they had, not to exceed 9.5 pounds. Again, as an infantry soldier, that's still a little heavy, but it's doable. Clip-fed magazine not to exceed 10 rounds. These clips hold 8. And again, that's why they utilize that, the 8 rounds. Safety or locking device. When you're carrying this rifle and your buddy's right in front of you and you're going through brush and everything else, you don't want something to happen where that you could shoot your friend in the back or shoot your friend by accident or something. So it has a good safety device on there. That safety device is very pronounced and it will hold that trigger. It's not going to fall. Semi-automatic only. We already had automatic weapons, so they didn't want that. They wanted a semi-automatic rifle because of the waste of ammunition maybe from an automatic, and then the inaccuracy as well for an automatic weapon. It's harder to hang on to that weapon that's automatic and keep it on target. I've shot a Thompson submachine gun before, and it's difficult. It is difficult to keep from rising up. So kind of keep that in mind. Accuracy has to be comparable to the M1903 Springfield. That's a very accurate weapon they had for years and years. They want it to be, the new weapon to be very accurate as well. The story of the M1 Garand starts with this man, John Cantius Garand. Yes, I did pronounce that correct, and Susan pronounced it correct earlier. Garand. He was born January 1st, 1888, St. Remy, a farming community outside Montreal, Quebec, Canada. In 1898, 3 years after his mother's death, his father and 11 brothers and sisters moved to Connecticut. At age 14, he started working as a floor sweeper and bobbin boy in a textile factory that employed his father. Dropping out of school in the 4th grade, he began developing his mechanical skills. And by the age of 18, he was working as a tool and gauge maker for Brown and Sharp in Providence, Rhode Island. In 1915, he joined the Federal Screw Corporation as a foreman and machine designer. When the United States entered World War I, John moved to New York City and worked for a manufacturer of micrometers. 1916, the widespread use of machine guns was well known, and most were too heavy, too frail, or too complex. The Army's 1909 Bonnet-Maché machine rifles' dismal performance sparked an interest in Garand, and he designed a fully automatic machine rifle, completing his model in June of 1918, first submitted to the United States Navy. It was passed on to the Army's Ordnance Department. It was rejected by the Ordnance Department, but found favor with the Bureau of Standards, where he was hired on and asked to make a model, which he completed in 1919. This first rifle that he invented was a primer actuated concept. The primer, the little primer on the back of the shell casing, once that's hit, the explosion from that would actually move the action in the rifle. But that would require, of course, certain types of ammunition for the primer to move like that. The performance and design so impressed the Ordnance Department that John was asked to develop a semi-automatic rifle at Springfield Armory based on his design. John Garand began his career as a civil service employee at Springfield Armory on November 4th, 1919. Within a year, John Garand became a naturalized United States citizen. This is the 1919 patent rifle that he made at the Bureau of Standards. But again, it was an automatic rifle, and they wanted a semi-automatic instead. They didn't really want it to be an automatic, so they wanted him to keep working on it and develop one that was semi-automatic. So he developed these two, the Model 1920, and then he developed the Model 1921. They're 30 caliber. He created that, but again, these are primer actuated. A cool story is that one of these actually exists over at Fort Lee in the Ordnance Department. I've actually went over there and was able to visit and took pictures of it and everything else. They actually have one of these from John Garand's Model 1921. They have one of them there. Very cool. He developed the 1923 model there, and then the T3E2 Garand, but it was in .276 caliber. And I'll show you the comparison in caliber in just a second, but it did have a different caliber, and that was because of his main competitor was John Pedersen for the rifle bid. They were trying to compete against each other for the military's contract. The Radical T1E3 Pedersen rifle used this rifle here, used an angular system, toggle blowback system, instead of a gas system, and it was chambered in .276. But look how many parts, 99 parts. Is that going to be a problem for manufacturing? The answer is yes. Also, look at how this one, the action of it goes. As a soldier looking down that barrel and looking down through there trying to stay on target, is that going to be distracting? Popping up in your face every shot? Absolutely. Plus, the soldiers complained when they were firing it, if they had their helmet on, it would actually hit the front of their helmet. So it would pop their helmet up on their head, and it's like, no, that's not good. So we need to do something different. They didn't like it. Plus, it had to be so intricate when it was manufactured to work. So again, not a good solution. February 1932, Army Chief of Staff, you heard this name before, Douglas MacArthur, ordered all work on the .276 rifles and ammunition to cease immediately. By then, John Garand had built a new bolt for his .30 caliber rifle and completed a few other adjustments. He had been working on the .276 and the .30 caliber simultaneously, luckily. So the following month, he put in the T1E2, and it performed well in all tests. The T3E2 you saw on the previous slide, the .276 caliber, was officially done forever. That one never came back. And there's a comparison between on the left, the 276, and on the right, the bigger 30-06 cartridge. And MacArthur wanted to stay consistent because all of our other weapons that you saw earlier, including the 1903 and the 1917, and all those machine guns, they used that same 30-06 cartridge. He did not want to change to 276. It'd be years and years before they would change that. August 1933, T1E2 was changed to U.S. semi-automatic rifle, caliber 30 M1. Notice the gas trap and gas cylinder at the front end of the barrel. It has a single blade front sight there that you see on the end of the barrel. The Garand Rifle, and again, John Garand was fine with us Americans accentuating the second syllable. So we always call it the Garand, but his name pronounced Garand. More emphasis on the first syllable instead of the second syllable, but again, he was okay with it and he liked that it was named after him. Again, the gas trap system on the front end of the barrel with sight protective ears now have been added to protect that single blade in the center. So you see those ears sticking up on each side of it. So again, that's the adoption of it, January the 9th, 1936. So it took a while. Remember, he started working at Springfield Armory in 1919. Over 16 years of his life has been dedicated to just developing this weapon. Now it's finally been adopted by the United States military, 1936. What's the next steps in production? Well, here they are. Drawings have to be made for every one of the parts. 69 separate parts. Then you have to have procurement, and we know how government procurement can go. You have to get all of the machines and materials and everything that's needed. So it has to be a lot of pieces and parts coming together to make this rifle. Machines have to be produced to make the parts. Most of the machines at Springfield Armory by this time are pretty antiquated. They've been making the 1903 since 1903. So they're very antiquated by this time in 1936. The operation itself, routing the different parts around the manufacturing factory and other places. How do you get all these parts to where they need to be? And I'll show you in just a moment some different shops pictures, but the routing of this has to be routed around. You got to have the barrels come from here, you got to have this come from the receiver over here, has to be put together. The stocks, all of the different walnut stocks and so forth. Then you've got the tools themselves. They're antiquated, they need new tools. The fixtures to clamp down the parts so that they can be cut or drilled exact. And then the jigs so that it holds it in place, and the jig sets it up to that hole has to be right where it needs to be, or that cut needs to be right where it needs to be as well. So the jigs to cut it exact. The gauges so that they can be gauged and figured out so that everything is good to go when these are made, and they're interchangeable. I can take parts out of pretty much any of these M1 Garands and move it to another one and it should operate. And they do for the most part. You can't tell which original piece come out of which one. And then you got to have the facilities. They had to greatly expand their operation to be able to produce these in a mass production for our military. Thousands of them, of course. And then the workers. That's one of the most important features of this whole thing, is the workers that they need to produce these by the thousands. Luckily for Springfield Armory, they had hired John Garand. Over the 16 years of development, he had designed the M1 with production in mind, as well as interchangeability of these parts. He developed most of the tools, machines, procedures, and gauges used for the production of the rifles. And you see him using a gauge over here on the picture on the left. And again, some of the tooling, the preciseness that has to be done for these to work. Production began back in 1932 in those test models. Before it was officially adopted, they made 80 experimental rifles in the model shop. These are semi-production line and some tools and things, but a lot of handwork went into that. Look at the cost of that, $1,831.08 at that time. That's astronomical. But that was because they were developing this. They had to figure it out. So September of 37, first production, 10 rifles per day, 38, 20 per day. July of 39, 100 per day. What happens in 1939? Yep. So Germany attacks Poland, and we got the start of World War II. So all of that going on. So 1940, 200 per day. Now they've got the cost down because of the machines. They've got all the things going on in the factories and different stuff. $76 per rifle. Total that year, $33,043. Here's Springfield Armory, building number 13. You can go up there and visit this building to this day, because now that's the Springfield National Historic Site that you can go to, and their museum and stuff. But Springfield Armory was established in 1794 by George Washington, but even before it was used before then, it was used by the Continental Army in the American Revolution as a supply depot and arsenal. The site was chosen next to the Connecticut River because of the power of the water source from the river, but also it was not navigable, luckily, by warships. Let's see if I can readjust this a little bit. So it was not navigable up the river, so the British can't sail up the river and attack us in anything along those lines or attack that site because they can't get their ships up through there. Who can name the other armory established by Washington? Where was the other one for the United States? Not
Harper's Ferry.
Harper's Ferry, right here, Harper's Ferry, Virginia, at that time. That was the other one. It was destroyed in the Civil War days. So that was the other one Washington established, those two arsenal armories. Here is the Hilltop Shops at Springfield Armory. That's a picture that was taken in the 40s. Look at all the buildings that they utilize. All of that is pretty much for the production of these rifles and for all of the other functions that go into it. The water shops are down below, about 1 mile from the other Hilltop Shops. So about 1 mile away is the water shops, and down there they're going to have the drop forge hammers and also the big forges where all of the materials, your barrels are stamped, your receivers are stamped, all of these other different smaller parts are all stamped out down there at these water shops to be able to do that. But then you have to route them up the hill to the Hilltop Shop so they can assemble them and finish grinding them and make sure they're all set to standard and ready to go. Here's presented serial number 1. It's on display at the Springfield National Historic Site, Springfield, Massachusetts. Like I say, Bruce and I and another friend got to go up there last August and visit that site, and in there is all of these different weapons and different things from the history. So here's serial number 1, very first one made. First rifle off of the production line is pictured at the top, serial number 81. Unfortunately, it did not pass test firing. So number 87 was then grabbed, and it was the first one that actually passed test firing, and function firing, everything was fine with that one. The other one was tweaked, and it was just fine after that too, but number 87 became the first one to pass everything. Here's the early design. There was some flaws and issues that were identified. 3 design changes were identified in 1939, incorporated 39 into 1940. They included the gas trap system. They switched it from the gas trap to the gas port. This illustration here on the left will show you what I'm talking about a lot more. So on that top left, you see that the gas trap system, again, the system is on the front. The barrel is not really even connected to it. So when the bullet's flying through there, it has to go through another hole to go out the end of the gas plug. What's that going to do for you? It's going to mess up your accuracy big time. So that was a problem. It's going to mess with accuracy, plus carbon and other things built up down in there, and that's going to be a problem. So they did what they call the gas port. John Garand went back to the design there and made a 1/8 inch hole and ported it down through the barrel. So the bottom of the barrel, they drilled that hole, and then the gas would come down from the explosion of the round. It would go down into the gas chamber area there, and it would accentuate the action with the piston there. It would push that action back. So that would accentuate this whole thing being able to, it would, once it's fired, it's going to put your next round in and close. So everything is good to go. Do you see another problem with that other gas trap? What happens if those screws come loose on that? You could blow the whole thing right off the end of your rifle and it's unusable whatsoever. So that would be a problem. So that was not a good design to start with, but he went back to the drawing board very quickly and came up with the gas port system. Another design was the butt plate, trap door, 2 holes in it, and it can accommodate a cleaning system, cleaning rods, and an oiler, and a little brush to send through the barrel. All of these are in this back end here. I can do this without killing myself. So there are 2 holes in the butt end of it, in that little gas, that trap door, and that's what's in there. And one of them is the oiler, and the other one is the cleaning rods. So again, those are up in that trapdoor area, so they're able to clean the rifle and keep it cleaned in the field. Another thing they identified was the little sight adjustments were coming loose. When you're firing a rifle, that's a lot of violence going through that rifle, so they would come loose, so they put on these lock bars. You see the one on the right at the bottom has like a little bar on it, and that would adjust it to keep it tight, and they wouldn't lose their battle sight 0. Very important to keep that in accuracy. Another problem they identified was the 7th round stoppage. As you see in this photograph, that 7th round would ride up and hit against the chamber, and then it would not go into the chamber itself. And they were wondering, well, why is that happening? So they tried to figure this thing out. Once, quite a few sleepless nights, of course, the problem was identified, and drilling the hole for the receiver to receive the barrel onto it, the cutter tool was allowed to travel too deep to the point it shaved off the top. You see the top edge where that little pointer is pointing on the top one, that's been shaved down, and that was causing the problem. It went too deep when they were threading for the barrel, so therefore they discovered that and figured it out. All those previous receivers where that problem was identified, they called them back in, and they welded this little piece you see on the bottom. That little rib, that little piece of metal, they just put that extra piece of welding at the top of it, fix the problem. Manufacturing the M1 started with the steel bars you see on the card on the left. They were put into the forge, heated red hot, and then driven by these large hammers. You see those big, gigantic forge hammers coming down, and they would drive those down into the different dies that they had for the parts. So this is a die on the left, and they would drive that molten metal down in there. Once they had it like that, and they would bring it out, and then they would start forging it even more from there, and now it's ready for the tooling process and the cutting of it. So you see various tools. A lot of detail has to be gone into this to be able to get it to what you need of a receiver. So all these different steps have to be done, and each one of these parts is used to be able to do a certain function. Here on the left, you see that steel bar being shaped into a trigger, an actual hammer. So you see the hammer of the M1 Garand on that steel bar being driven and pounded into that shape. Then you got to cut away the excess metal and so forth to get down and finally get a finished hammer on the top right. Then at the on the left or the right of the picture over there, you see a trigger guard being manufactured. All that metal has to be cut away and so forth. And then you've got, later on they identified they could use a stamped process. The one on the bottom right is stamped. It's just a piece of metal stamped and then rolled up on each side. Here's a whole rack of Garand rifles out in front of the armory. I'd love to have all of those, of course. Wow. Male workers had predominantly been employed with the Army over the years, but with the start of World War II, the men were volunteering from military service or being drafted. They still were not exempt from the draft, so they were being drafted. With the tremendous push for the production and with the Armory going to 3 shifts, working around the clock, women were being recruited to practically fill every aspect of the manufacturing process. Here, Mary Smith works in the forge shop alongside a male co-worker. I couldn't imagine the heat and everything else that was down there. On the right is a recruiting and patriotic poster. Here, a woman ordnance worker is hard at work sanding stocks for the rifles. What might have been a reason for the women to be reluctant to enter the workforce? Why would they not want to do this maybe?
Dangerous.
Dangerous, yeah, that's part of it. What else? Other reasons that they might not have wanted, I mean, I'm sure some of you ladies probably didn't want to go into the workforce for years either because of this reason. Childcare, yes, children. Childcare was a big thing on their minds. Springfield Armory identified that. Next thing you know, they had the child care centers at the Armory. So the ladies could come in, drop their kids at the child care center and go and complete a shift in the factory. So that was taken care of, and they felt they were contributing to the war effort, of course. Priscilla Bryant, she is an employee, but a high school student. She is inspecting M-block clips, top left. On the right, you got Ellen Peach. She's busy sorting and inspecting rear sight pinions. To boost morale and increase safety, going back to the point there about danger, increase the safety and all for the ladies' long hair getting caught in machinery, the Women Ordinance Worker bandanas were distributed to the ladies. So I have some reproduction ones here of the ladies' ordnance bandanas. The Armory gave these out as official WWII bandanas starting in February 1943 at an Own to Victory dance. The ladies wore them with pride, knowing they were helping the war effort. They knew they were supplying the much needed weapons for the soldiers at the front. The WWII concept, Women Ordinance Workers, was created to foster the patriotic spirit and identification.
How the hell do I? Oh, sorry about that.
Oh,
I don't understand my own phone.
yeah, I'm with you.
I apologize.
That's quite all right. The flaming bombs on this bandana, it's a flaming shell that's the Ordnance Department symbol. And it's instead of Rosie the Riveter. Rosie the Riveter, remember, has the white dots, the solid white dots. These have the ordnance shell on them, distinguishing these ladies across the United States as ordnance workers. Where is a site here in Virginia that was big for the Army in ordnance, still producing it today? Do y'all know where maybe?
Radford Arsenal.
Yep, Radford Arsenal. Radford Arsenal is still going strong today, and it's the ladies ordnance workers there were very important to our war effort as well. So right here, tied back to Virginia. By 1944, at the height of production, women made up 43% of the workforce at Springfield Armory. They were employing 5,210 women at that point. The Winchester Repeating Arms Company in New Haven, Connecticut was the only other World War II era producer of the M1 Garand Rifle. Winchester received an educational order on April 4th, 1939 to produce 500 M1s. The first 100 rifles under that order were shipped on December 27th, 1940. On the left-hand side, you got the stock cutting with the lathe. And on the right-hand side, you've got the grooves being cut into the barrel for the accuracy of the bullet cut into the barrel on the right. Final assembly at the top left, test firing there on the top right, and then you got the ladies doing ammunition cartridges at the bottom right. Winchester employed thousands of women just like Springfield Armory to fill the production needs. Keep in mind, Winchester was also producing M1 carbines. We have a carbine over on that table. That was another rifle that was used in World War II. Browning automatic rifles, and then many other weapons and ammunition. The WWIIs, the Women Ordinance Workers, their war effort cannot be overstated. Really important. We were able to outproduce enemy nations, contributing greatly to the winning of World War II. Government records indicate Winchester delivered 513,880 M1 rifles between December 1940 and June of 1945. Here's some production numbers for you. You can see these different ones. 1944, January, 122,001 M1s produced that month. This translated to 3,936 per day, or 164 rifles per hour. Total deliveries from the two manufacturers was 4,040,802. During World War II, again, just those two were making the rifles. But in the 1950s, with the Korean War, Springfield Armory started back up production, and then they also were joined by International Harvester, which International Harvester farm machinery. But they were able to tool a factory to be able to produce these weapons. I've got an International Harvester weapon right here, produced by International Harvester. Harrington and Richardson was another company that produced them. They produced another 1.5 million rifles between 1952 and 1957. This little newspaper they had going on around Springfield Armory, soldiers of production, our thousands of whirling machines stamp, cut, grind into the parts that make the finest weapons in the world. As each workman senses his individual responsibility, our production rises and rises. Our fighting forces must have guns, tanks, ships, and planes. We will give them these weapons, shining, fine, accurate, made with our strength, our hands, our hearts, and souls. This is our solemn and holy promise to the soldiers who are fighting for us and to the country we love. Also, like this one here on the top right with Winchester, that creed, like that first one, I shall not be absent from my job without a sound reason, because you can't spell victory with an absent T. Lieutenant General George S. Patton wrote in his 26 January 1945 communique, in my opinion, the M1 rifle is the greatest battle implement ever devised. Whoop. And I think my story here. That's high praise, and it's demonstrated in this quick war story. In the early dawn hours of June 7, 1944, after jumping into Normandy with the 82nd Airborne 28 hours earlier, First Lieutenant Waverly Ray set out on a one-man reconnaissance at the behest of his battalion commander. Ray's mission was to assess the state of German forces planning a counterattack against the weakly held American positions outside St. Mary-Glease. Ray struck out armed with his M1 rifle, a Colt 45 1911A1, half a dozen grenades, and a silver-plated .38 revolver tucked in his jump boot. Hearing German voices on the other side of a French hedgerow, Ray burst through the brush and shouted, "Handy Hook!" Confronting him were 8 German officers huddled around a radio. For a moment, nobody moved. Then 7 pairs of hands went up. The 8th German officer reached for a sidearm. Lieutenant Ray shot the man between the eyes with his M1. A pair of German soldiers about 100 yards away opened up on Ray with MP-40 submachine guns. 9mm bullets cut through his combat jacket and shot away half of his right earlobe. All the while, Ray methodically dispatched each of the 7 remaining German officers as they struggled to escape. Once he had killed all 8 German officers, he dropped into a nearby ditch, loaded a fresh 8-round clip into his M1, took careful aim, and killed the 2 distant Wehrmacht soldiers with the MP-40s. Ray fought his way back to his company area to report what he had found, blood soaking his jacket. His first question was to ask where he could replenish his supply of grenades. When American forces eventually took the field where Ray had waged his one-man war against the leadership of the 1st Battalion, 158th Grenadier Infantry Regiment, they found all 10 German soldiers dead from a single round each. Ray had completely eliminated the enemy battalion's leadership single-handedly with his M1 Garand rifle. There's no way he could have successfully done that with a bolt-action rifle. This semi-automatic rifle, he was able to do that and save a lot of our troops.
Why did they call him the Deacon?
Because he was a very religious man. He was a little bit older than a lot of the others, but basically he was very religious, and they just nicknamed him that, and he appreciated it. So, unfortunately, he was killed in September of '44. He was killed in Holland in September. All right. In comparison, the hits per minute rate of fire averaged 22 hits per minute for the M1 Garand rifle, whereas the bolt-action rifles of the Axis powers, the Axis enemies, was approximately 9 rounds per minute. So look at our advantage in firepower. It was very good for us. As aptly put by Alexander Rose, for the first time in living memory, the United States was actually ahead of its traditional competitors in rifle development. Britain, France, and Germany all went to war in 1939 with the same rifles they had used in 1914. The Garand could not have come along at a better time. From Scott Duff, an author, one of the leading authors on the M1, John Garand's rifle was the single most significant small arms developed in the history of warfare. No other rifle in this nation's history so outclassed that of its adversaries. The accuracy, reliability, ruggedness, and most of all, its firepower cannot be matched by any of the Axis powers during World War II. All weapons of war were vital to the Allied victory: airplanes, ships, tanks, artillery, etc. However, in the final analysis, it was the man with the rifle who ultimately closed with and destroyed the enemy. The M1 Garand rifle breaks down into three main groups: trigger group, receiver barrel there, and then the stock group. Very easy to work on. You see this armor in the field. Soldiers would have a broken part, they bring it to that armor, they pop the part out, pop another one in, it's interchangeable. That soldier's back in business with his weapon just about right away. So very interchangeable. So I'll do this real quick. So the trigger group pops out of here very easily. Pop it up with that handy tool. There's my trigger group, comes right out. My stock lifts right off. And then I can get into all of the internal parts pretty much from here. There's a little pin to take out and so forth, and I can manipulate these other pieces and parts from there. So pretty easy weapon overall to work on and take care of in the field and for the soldiers. And with that, we are wrapped up. Any questions I can answer? Yes, sir.
Would you clarify for the Navy guys here what the difference between a rifle and a gun is?
Oh my, I don't think I want to go there. I better be careful on that one. My dad served in the Navy too. Yeah, yeah. My dad was a Navy man who fought in Korea. He was off the coast of Korea, and they were doing air operations there. Yes, sir.
What is an NRA rated good condition M1 worth today?
Through the civilian marksmanship program, you can still get them about $1,200 roughly. Depends on kind of condition and all. A lot of them, like the ones we shoot all the time, they have been rebarreled, most all of them. I've got one that still has a 1942 barrel on it, but it's in pretty bad condition, so I don't really shoot that one a whole lot at all. But the other ones have been re-arsenaled and, you know, the barrels, new barrels put on them. When we built our rifle, so when we went to Alabama, built this rifle here, and this has a brand new manufactured barrel by a company called Faxon, and it threads right on to the receiver. My receiver is January 1944. So this part is, you know, from the war and everything else, but some of these other parts, of course, the barrel and so forth, has been refitted. Chances of finding one of these in totally original condition, I can only speak to one that I know of, and that is in the Ordnance Museum over here at Fort Lee. And that one is an original gas trap model from 1939. And it's beautiful to hold and to see, but that's the only one I know of that has most all the original parts on it. Other questions that we can answer?
What is the CMP?
It is the Civilian Marksmanship Program. And again, Teddy Roosevelt He, of course, fought in the Spanish-American War, and he wanted our civilian people to be familiar with guns in case we all of a sudden had to make a draft and go to war or something. We need people that could shoot guns and figure it out. So he wanted people to have some marksmanship skills, so they started the civilian marksmanship program, and it's been around for all these years. And that's why they get a hold of the military weapons that are surplus and are able to turn those around and sell them to collectors and people like myself that are enthusiasts about them. So, bless you. All righty.
Question over here.
Yep.
Gary?
Yep.
You were talking about the armories or factories where these were made. Did they have any, like spies or anything, try to sabotage those places?
I did not come across any stories of that. Maybe, but not that I'm aware of.
Or was there a security perimeter around it that was effective?
They had a pretty good, like at Springfield Armory, they had a lot of officers. There's officer badges and stuff in their museum up there. They kept a pretty good rein on them. They had ID tags and stuff that they had to wear. So yes, some security for sure. Yep. All right, so with that, we really appreciate your time this afternoon. And again, the ladies were super important to our war effort. So thank you to all the ladies that were a part of that and came forward to help with the production. And I hope you enjoyed today, and please come up and we'll be around to answer any questions on the weapons themselves and take a look. Thank you.